Welcome. Tonight I will tell you a story about a day in the life of a watchmaker in 19th century Switzerland. Make yourself comfortable, save this video, and let it guide you gently into a peaceful sleep. Now, let us begin our journey. Dawn leans over the Alps like a careful hand smoothing linen. Frost smokes on the window panes. The slate roofs below are powdered white, and somewhere a baker turns the first loaves, the warm, yeasty breath of his oven drifting up the lane. In the room above the workshop, Jakob Amsler wakes to the old music, ticks layered upon ticks, a forest of seconds planted on his walls. Some clocks run the thin, nervous beat of travelers late for a coach. Others speak in slow syllables, convinced that morning will arrive whether anyone rushes or not. He lies still for a moment, counting. The regulator on the far wall marks each second with the clean click of a metronome. The little Neuchâtel pendule beside the bed insists on being a fraction ahead. The carriage clock on the shelf clears its throat every half minute with a polite snick. When the parish bell in the square throws 6 strokes against the cold, Jakob notes inwardly, automatically, that his regulator is 2 minutes past. The tower is slow again. He will have words with its weights today. He folds the wool blanket back and swings his feet to the plank floor, which answers with a groan familiar as an old friend. The room smells faintly of oil and steel, beeswax and coffee grounds, and the winter air carries the thin metal scent of snow. On the washstand, a film of ice rims the jug. He cracks it, pours a little water into the basin, and splashes his face until stiffness gives way to wakefulness. On his desk, beneath the window, lies a letter sealed with the railway's blue stamp. He turned it over twice last night and did not open it. Now he breaks the wafer and reads by the grey morning, neat engineer's hand, precise as a drawing. Brother, we pass through your valley before dusk with the new timetable. A standard time will be shown at the station, no more arguing with the sun. If you will meet me on the platform, I have for you a parcel, balance springs and a surprise besides. Otto A. Jacob's mouth makes a shape that is not quite a smile. Standard time. He glances at the regulator, then at the pale sky. The railway has decided to teach the town what noon is. He wonders if the sun agrees. He folds the letter back into itself and tucks it under the stone that keeps his to-do papers from walking off in a draft. The stone, smooth and oval, came down the mountain in an avalanche the winter his father died. Beside it stands his father's watch, a Lépine with a lever escapement, polished smooth by years of pockets. It stopped at 2:17 on a day that still has a shape. Jakob winds it each week and listens. The balance makes half a dozen brave beats and quits. Somewhere a pivot is proud, a staff not what it should be. He sets the watch down gently and says the old sentence he says only to it. Not yet. He dresses, linen shirt, wool waistcoat, his father's leather apron folded over his arm, and descends the narrow stair to the workshop. The smell reaches him first. Whale oil and clock lacquer, warm metal and cold filings, the ghost of last night's candle. He sets a match to the small iron stove, feeds it 2 thin billets of alder, and squats a moment to watch flame find its breath. Then he turns to the shutters, throws them open, and lets the valley in. Morning gathers in the panes, a girl with a pail picking her way along the cobbles, a postboy shivering in a coat too thin, a dog making earnest declarations to a pile of snow. The bench waits, scarred oak polished by wrists and elbows, its surface ruled into little empires, trays for screws, for wheels, for jewels, a felt-lined board where hairsprings can be persuaded, little tins of rouge and pumice, a clockmaker's loop lying like a black coin. Above it hangs the pegboard of tools, brooches, engravers, pin vices, tweezers with points sharper than a word. Jacob lights the lamp, adjusts the wick until it makes the exact soft yellow oval he prefers, and brings the regulator's glass door open with a click that might be called affectionate. He checks the regulator against his sun mark, the brass pin he hammered into the sill years ago, exactly where a beam threads the window at local noon in summer. It is winter. The beam will find him at a different angle. Still, his ritual has a place on the clock. He nudges the rating nut a half turn and listens to the tick lengthen by a breath. "That's you being stubborn," he tells it. We will argue later with the tower. In the ledger, calfskin, ink browned by age, he writes today's line in the same hand his father taught him. Keller, silver lepine, broken spring. Baumgartner, cow market, erratic beat. Tower, +2 meters at 6, adjust. Post, Neuchâtel spring, blue. Rail, platform at dusk. The act of writing steals the sharpness from his morning. It arranges the hours for him, makes a map the day can follow. A rap on the outer door, quick and apologetic. Jakob wipes his hands and opens to the cold. Frau Keller stands there, cheeks flushed, breath in white ribbons, a basket looped over her arm. The basket holds a wrapped parcel and a loaf wrapped in a cloth that smells exactly like the bakery he woke to. "Meister Amsler," she says, dipping her head. "Forgive the hour. It is my husband's watch. It stopped on St. Nicholas's Day, just before the last hymn. He would have wanted, well, you remember how he was about time Jakob takes the parcel. It is light and heavy at once, the way objects are when they are mostly history. I remember," he says. Herr Keller measured wood by the half finger and promises by the minute. "Is there a hurry?" She looks down at her gloves, then up. The notary reads the paper at the parish today afternoon. I thought, if we could set it going, so that when they speak his name, it keeps time again. He nods, as if she has asked for nothing at all. "Afternoon," he repeats. "Yes. Will you come at 11? We'll see what the old fellow says by then." She presses the bread into his hands, refuses coins with a shake of the head, and leaves as the frost makes the cobbles shine like glass behind her. Jakob unwraps the watch at the bench. The case is silver, engraved with a wreath, worn smooth at the edge where a thumb opens it, dozens of times a day for decades. He presses the hidden catch, the back devils open, and the movement looks up at him like a small, intricate animal caught in the act of breathing. The hairspring is true. The balance staff looks straight enough. The mainspring, when he eases the barrel, the click slips, and nothing answers. The spring is broken clean beyond the first turn. It happens. Metal remembers too strongly sometimes. He glances at the drawer labeled Springs and takes out 2 blue steel coils, one marked 13.5, one 14. He fits the 13.5 against the barrel wall, too proud. The 14 falls in with a sigh. He looks at the clock on the wall, 6:30, and at the light outside, which has decided to exist properly now. He can do this before 11. If the steel behaves, if his luck does not hide. The bell over the door rings again. A boy, cap set at a hopeful angle, boots clotted with yesterday's road, edges in, holding his cap in both hands like an apology. Leo 12, face made of elbows and intentions. Meister, he begins, and then sees the watch on the bench and stops himself from moving closer. A good morning, Leo, Jacob says, not looking up. Sweep. Then warm your fingers. There will be a spring to coax today. Leo grins into his cap and attacks the floor with a broom he treats like an instrument. Dust shivers. Filings make small comets in the lamplight. A cat that does not technically belong to anyone but belongs to the whole street lifts her head from the stove and decides to forgive them. Jakob settles the loop in his eye. The world tightens obediently. The barrel gives up its broken coil reluctantly. He teases the new spring into place, breath held at the point where steel likes to remember it was once flat. A mote of blue seizes his thumb. He lets it, then persuades it to sit. He oils the jewels with a drop that would shame a tear, closes the back, and winds gently, listening to the coil take its new duty without complaint. He sets the watch face down and watches the balance. It wavers. It thinks. It commits. Beat, beat, beat. Not yet the right amplitude, not yet perfectly in beat, but alive. He cocks his head and listens past the single watch to the room. The Neuchâtel clock has fallen in love with the carriage time and is trying to follow it. The regulator declines to be influenced. The old Fribourg long case is sulking. The escapement wants a whisper of oil. The workshop is a parliament. He moves among them, touching here, turning there, until the argument becomes a conversation. At 8, Herr Baumgartner arrives with a cow's winter on his coat and a pocket watch that has performed acrobatics in a market fight. The glass is spidered, the minute hand is sullen. Jakob promises him a face new as a vow and a beat that will not embarrass him when he pays for bolts in town. The farmer leaves with a promise to return at dusk and 2 biscuits stolen, by tradition, off the jar by the door. At 9, the postboy brings a paper tied in string from Neuchâtel marked Springs. Fine, and a second envelope with the railway's crest. The boy stamps his feet and admires the regulator the way boys admire tall horses. He leaves smelling of cold and ink. Jakob tucks the Neuchâtel coil in its drawer, unread letter beside Otto's under the stone. One story at a time. By 10, Leo has warmed his fingers and learned again how not to breathe on a hairspring. Jakob shows him how a pallet stone kisses a tooth, how the lift keeps the beat, how oil is a manner, not a substance. Do you hear the difference? He asks. Leo nods so hard the loop almost jumps from Jakob's eye. Outside, the light has shifted toward honest day. In the square, the parish bell rings the hour, and Jakob's jaw answers before his hands do. 1 minute and 40 seconds behind his regulator. He closes the Keller watch, wins it one last slow turn, and checks the beat against the seconds on his wall. Satisfied like a man who will permit himself satisfaction only in the private chambers of his chest, he lays the lépine on the soft leather pad. 11, he says, as the shadow of the church roof slides across his window like a page turned. Frau Keller will knock now. And almost on the last syllable, the bell above the door sings again, exactly in time with the world he has been tuning all morning. The bell over the door answers his prediction with a bright jingle, and Frau Keller steps in out of the cold, drawing the door close with the care of someone who has learned not to waste heat or sound. A line of snow dusts her shawl. She does not remove her gloves. Instead, she stands, hands folded, eyes fixed on the bench where her husband's watch lies like a small, sleeping animal. It goes, Jakob says simply, and turns the silver case so the dial faces her. He sets the watch on the soft leather pad, lets the beat speak for itself. Tick, tick, tick. Not loud, exact. He does not offer it across the table yet. He watches the sound find her. Her breath catches once. She presses her lips together and nods. He listened to that more than to me, she says, not bitterly. Perhaps it will listen at noon. We set it true, he answers. It is not a promise against the world, only against friction and neglect. He winds it 2 slow turns, sets the minute hand to his regulator, and this time he does offer it. 2 hands, the old Amsler way, as if returning a child. She holds the watch near her ear, closes her eyes and bows her head. The line of her shoulders softens. The room seems to exhale with her. She reaches into her basket, draws out a folded piece of paper sealed with red wax, and slides it across to Jakob. The notary, she explains. Names, parcels, dates. I don't know what any of it truly means. But I wanted the tick under it. You will have it, he says. Go slowly on the ice. The bell will call you. She hesitates in the doorway. And you, Meister? Will you hear it too? I have business with a larger bell, he answers, glancing at the brass note in his ledger. But I will hear yours. When she is gone, the room holds a little of her winter with it. Faint chalk dust on the air, a trace of bakery warmth trapped in the cloth that wrapped the loaf. Leo slips the broom back to its hook and looks at the door as if a story had just gone out and might come back in again if invited. Crystal, Jacob says, tapping the spidered face of Herr Baumgartner's watch. Practice for you. We will not break it further. They work in tandem. Jacob eases the bent minute hand from its pipe and trews it over a block of maple. Leo takes the old crystal out, cleans the bezel with a bit of pegging wood, breath by visible breath, and tests 3 glass domes from the drawer marked double asterisk, 044 to 46 double asterisk, before one seats with a tiny, satisfied click. Jakob gives him the smallest nod. 2 years ago, the boy would have grinned and knocked something. Today he only lets his shoulders drop half a finger width, which is triumph enough. At 11:30, Jakob shrugs into his coat and lifts a canvas roll of tools from its hook. Small bottles, a thin brass feeler, a short file, a length of silk cord, a tiny vial of oil, the key to the tower door. He takes a narrow set of steps hidden behind the tall long case at the back. Steps he has been allowed to use since he was 12, and his father said, "Up there is where the town keeps its promises. Outside, the square is a shallow bowl of light." The snow has stopped. The sky is a white that will never entirely admit to being blue. The church tower stands with its shoulders squared, a pale rectangle against the mountain. Pigeons argue about something without conviction along the cornice. Herr Vogt, the sexton, meets Jakob at the iron door with a ring of keys and a look that is both relief and complaint. "She drifts," Vogt says by way of greeting, as if speaking of a difficult cousin. "I take 2 minutes from her, and she takes 1 back in the night." "Then we shall change her appetite," Jakob says. They climb. Wooden treads worn concave by boots, cold air leaking through the slit windows, the soft smell of stone and old rope. At the first landing, the bell hammers loom, their heads padded like sleeping fists. Higher, the clockroom opens, a cage of beams and iron. The movement sits in the middle like a beast that has consented to be studied. Great wooden frame, 2 trains side by side, the going and the striking, barrels shouldered with cable, lantern pinions chewing methodically, a fly governor that will refuse to hurry if begged. Jakob stands still a moment and listens. The going train's anchor strides a little too long, pauses a little too much, amplitude high, pendulum too long. "She is slow," he says almost kindly. He sets his canvas roll down and opens it on a beam. Tools wink in the grey light. He takes the key and stops the train. The tick dies as if someone had stepped out of the room and closed the door behind them. He measures the bob's distance from the chops with the brass feeler, checks his written note against the scratch marks he made on the iron plate last season, and shortens the pendulum by a turn and a half. Vogt watches with the long tolerance of a man who tends things that live longer than he will. "The notary reads after the Angelus," he says. "Frau Keller will be there." "I know," Jakob says, starting the train again. The tick returns, insistent, slightly higher in pitch. He oils 2 pallets with a drop so small it would be a shame to call itself a drop, then tests the strike. A quarter. Hammer raises and falls, half another, 3/4. The governor spins, refuses to rush. Hour, the great hammer waits with patient menace. Good. He lifts the hatch to the dial's back and adjusts the hand there with his gloved finger until it agrees with his regulator's traveling card. A piece of cardboard in his breast pocket with today's offsets neatly sketched. They climb onto the louved stage where the bells live, the air colder by a knife's thickness. The view is the view of people who are allowed to know how roofs fit, how alleys line up, how a town's geometry holds its breath. In the square below, people gather in 2s and 3s, scarves tied, hats down, mouths making smoke. A small black knot at the notary's door grows and thins and grows again. The Angelus tolls noon not by the sun but by men's agreement. 3 strokes, a pause, 3, a pause, 3. Jakob counts, lips moving, compares against the small seconds hand on the watch he brought for that purpose, a cheap but honest English lever whose rate he knows by heart. The last stroke lands within a whisker of where he would have put it. He allows himself to feel taller by the height of a coin. The hour will do. Next week, Vogt says, eyes sidelong, the station will set its own noon. The mayor says the railway's clock will be hung under glass and we should get used to it. He spits neatly into a corner where pigeons will find it scandalous later. Will the sun agree, Meister Amsler? The sun never agrees, Jacob says, smiling despite himself. It only goes on. They descend. On the square, the notary stands on the step with his book, spectacles fogged, voice crisp. Frau Keller is there, the silver glint of the watch chain visible at her throat where her shawl crosses. Jacob stands in the lee of the apothecary's doorway and listens without listening. Parcel of land, witness so-and-so in the presence of, and hears instead, between the names, the small private clock that beats near her collarbone. When the notary speaks her husband's name, her hand rises and cups the case like a bird. Tick, tick, tick. A promise kept in the only way promises are kept, briefly and exactly. He touches the brim of his hat when she looks up. She nods once, not to him only but to the day itself, and the watch disappears again beneath wool. Back in the workshop, warmth meets him like someone who does not like to be alone. Leo has set 2 plates on the stove, slices of bread laid with cheese, warming until the edges curl. He has also found Jacob's apple, which he intends to pretend he did not later. They eat at the bench, careful where crumbs fall. Meister, Leo asks, mouth clean because the boy has learned not to talk Greece into movements. When the station puts their clock and the tower says something else, which one is true? Jacob wipes his knife with a rag that has known 100 oils. A truth and time are cousins who do not write, he says. Then seeing the boy's face, time is 3 things. What the sun says, what the bell says, what your pocket says. The trick is to know which one matters where you are standing. And today, Jacob says, the bell mattered for Frau Keller. This evening, on the platform, the railway will matter. Here, he taps the bench, the work matters. He slides Baumgartner's watch toward Leo, who takes it with hands that remember they are capable. Jacob opens the small drawer of hands and lifts a blued steel minute hand with an eye like a good needle. He fits it to the pipe, presses, turns, it sits straight. He resets the minute track with a breath, replaces the crystal with a twist of the old bezel key, and whines listening. The beat returns, a little embarrassed by its morning adventure but steady. Through the open shutter comes the sound the town has learned in the last few years to call distance, a whistle far down valley, thin as a reed. Not yet the evening train, a midday goods service that will haunt the ridge and be gone. Still, the note writes a line under the day's ledger. Rail. Dusk. Otto. On the desk upstairs, not yet opened, lies the second letter with the railway crest. When the boy has gone to fetch coal and the cat has given up convincing the stove to birth sausages, Jakob takes the letter downstairs with him, breaks the wafer, and reads. Meister Amsler, the station master's round hand begins, friendly with its loops. We will install the station regulator today, as per the company's instruction. Your brother says you will not mind looking in at 5 to assist with the beat. The company favors Frankfurt mean, 1 minute 19 seconds ahead of our local noon today. There will be confusion until there is not. Your skill may make the confusion shorter. With thanks, M. Gazelle, station master. He folds the letter twice and slides it into the ledger. 1 minute and 19 seconds. A number that will sit like a small stone in the shoe of the town until the shoe learns it or throws it away. The afternoon takes its shape. More sorting. A mainspring teased into cooperation for a watch that has belonged to 3 generations of millers. A long case escapement freed of a grit of coal that turned its anchor into a soldier marching with stones in his boots. A visit from a schoolteacher with a slate under his arm, and a clock for the classroom that refuses to keep the same hour as the children. Jakob resets, oils, explains. He does not say the line his father used to say. People are worse than clocks, because he has learned that people, like clocks, do their best with the power they are given. At 4, Baumgartner returns, thawed from the inn and loud with gratefulness. He spins the crown once too many times and apologizes to it out loud. He leaves with his watch beating honest seconds and a warning not to use it as a fist again. At past, Jacob puts the closed plank in the door, hangs his coat and takes from the shelf the small mahogany box that holds his father's watch. The lepine lies inside on black felt, its white dial as calm as snow. He opens the back, wins 2 turns, hears the brave half-dozen beats, and then the familiar surrender. Not yet, he says again, but this time he sets it in his pocket nevertheless, an old superstition. A watch that could not be persuaded at home might find its heart somewhere else. Lock up, he tells Leo, who is polishing the regulator's glass as if it had gotten itself dirty on purpose. And go straight from here to your mother, not to the river. Leo's grin gives away 3 future sins and a promise to commit only one of them. Yes, Meister. Outside, the afternoon has turned the color of pewter, and the snow makes a new quiet out of every sound. Jakob walks toward the station with his canvas tool roll under his arm, his father's silent watch in his pocket, and his brother's neat sentence about standard time like a question he has agreed to answer aloud. As he passes the square, the parish clock strikes 5, on time for once with the beat he gave it. In the high windows of the station ahead, gaslights are being coaxed into bloom. And from far down the valley, thin but certain, comes the railway's whistle again, nearer now, drawing a straight line through the air toward the place where 2 brothers will test a clock against a timetable and see whose idea of noon the town will learn to love. Gaslight halos bloom in the station windows as dusk presses its face to the glass. Snow turns the platform into a quiet sheet of paper. Footsteps write on it and are erased by a drift of steam. The station smells of coal and cold iron, lamp oil and wool. Beneath the eaves, a new dial stares out at the town. White enamel, black Roman hours, a seconds ring neat as a rule, still blind, its hands at 12 as if refusing to begin until it is properly asked. Station Master Gsell meets Jakob at the door to the telegraph office, his coat glossy with melted snow. Meister Amsler, thank you. He speaks in a fast, tidy script like his letters. They've sent the regulator. It must sit under glass, says the company. The public clock on the gable will slave to it. Frankfurt Main, 1 minute 19 ahead. The line expects us to breathe on its count. He smiles with half his mouth. The town will argue with the sky for a week. The regulator hangs inside, a tall, severe rectangle of walnut behind a case that locks with a brass key. Its pendulum is a gridiron of alternating metals, the bob heavy and calm. The dial's seconds hand is a thin needle, waiting. Beside it, a telegraph sounder ticks, dry, insective, each click a pulse arriving from the city. On the table, a paper card with the day's offset neatly inked, a company pamphlet explaining in 3 paragraphs that railways dislike sunsets. Jakob lays his canvas roll open on the bench. The tools gleam in the gaslight. A thin file, a bottle of oil with a beak like a wren's, a silk cord, a small brass wedge. He winds the regulator's pulley, sets the pendulum swinging. The first beat is ungainly, like a tall man finding his stride on a boat. He listens with his head slightly turned, the way a doctor listens for something a patient has not mentioned. Left longer than right, he says. We'll center the crutch. He slips the brass wedge behind the case to true it against the wall, nudges the crutch until the tick and the tock trade places without resentment, shortens the rating nut a thread. The beat sharpens, the seconds hand starts its delicate march. Gsell watches the small transformations with the expression of a man watching something important that refuses to be visible. Through the open door comes the first whistle, thin, distant, the sound of mathematics traveling over hills. Lamps are opened along the platform, wicks find their courage. The goods porter chalks an arrival on the board. A few townspeople drift in, lured by novelty. A tinsmith with his cap in his hands, 2 boys trying to look as if they are not trying to be where they are. Frau Beery from the bakery with flour on her sleeves. They glance from the unopened public dial outside to the glassed-in regulator, as if wondering which one will decide when to eat and when to sleep. The rails begin to hum. Headlamp first, a white coin punched through blue air, then the engine shouldering in with a hiss, steam blooming around it like breath in winter. The brakes sigh down the length of the train. Couplings cluck, doors lurch and settle. From the second carriage, a man steps to the platform and laughs once in the cold, a sound Jakob has known since it broke from a smaller chest. The coat is railway cut, the hair is the same wrong side of tidy. The eyes are their father's. Jakob, Otto says, as if the years between are a trick of smoke, and they clasp forearms, the old way, because hands alone are too little. You look like a timetable, Jakob says. And you sound like a clock, Otto answers. He lifts a small parcel from his bag, wrapped in oiled paper and tied with cord. Springs as promised. And the surprise, he does not hand it over yet, the way children do not give a toy until they have watched your face become the face they want. Gzel's cough, professionally polite, returns them to motion. If you'll set the regulator to company time, gentlemen. The 1712 from Stans must leave at 1717, or Zurich will send a letter that will sting. The telegraph sounder clacks a minute mark into the little room. Tick tick, then a longer click that is the agreed upon top. Jakob glances at his card, +1:19. He lifts his cheap travelling lever, which he set to the parish bell at noon, and calculates the step in his head as easily as he breathes. He arrests the pendulum with 2 fingers at the next swing, advances the minute hand 1, then 19 seconds more as the sounder marks them in tidy clicks. He lets the pendulum go. The beat finds itself again. The second's hand meets the line exactly on the next long click. Gzel exhales. Somewhere beyond the door, a boy cheers under his breath and pretends he did not. Outside, a porter cranks the public dial to agree. The hands turn in a smooth, efficient sweep and stop. The tinsmith frowns at his pocket. Frau Beery sets her baker's watch by the glass and shakes her head. Bread doesn't rise by Frankfurt, she says, but her mouth smiles like a woman who will learn a new trick because the oven does not mind what she calls the hour as long as she keeps her eye on it. Otto leans on the sill and watches Jakob work, the way a man watches a brother fix the hinge of a shared door. You always did like the part where the world obeys. It never does, Jakob says. It consents for a while. They step onto the platform while Gzel writes in his book and the engine snuffs like a horse. Snow whispers underfoot. The lamp above them rings a small circle of brass light around the 2 men. How is mother? Jakob asks. She scolds the post for walking slowly and the baker for forgetting that her teeth remember softer crusts. Otto grins. She sent you this. He lifts the parcel at last. Springs enough to make you vain. And he unties the cord, folds the oiled paper back to reveal a tin, and inside the tin a small cylinder wrapped in tissue. Jakob opens it with his thumbs the way a man uncovers an heirloom. A balance staff lies there, bright steel turned to a proportion his hands recognize before his mind supplies the measure. Alongside it, in the tissue, a little scrap of paper, the ink old and brown, a sketch in their father's neat, stubborn hand, measurements in the margin, a note for the lépine if the pivots give up again. Jakob's mouth goes unsteady. Where? In the lining of his tool chest, Otto says. I took the chest apart when the company moved me. The note was pinned behind the drawer. He must have turned the staff and hid it from time like all his other good intentions. Jakob closes his fingers around the small length of steel, and for a moment feels his father's weight on the room, the familiar aggravation and patience of him. He takes out the silent lépine from his pocket and opens the back. The balance looks up, innocent of purpose. He does not attempt the transplant here, too cold, too public, but he lays the new staff across his palm and imagines the pivot falling into the jewel like a word into its right place. Not yet, he says softly, then amends it without meaning to. Soon, a whistle down train. 17 past, Gzel calls. Gentlemen. Otto lifts his bag. I leave again in 10 minutes, he says. I wanted to see you put the town into a new noon. You brought the noon, Jakob answers, jerking his chin toward the telegraph. I only made it presentable. They stand a moment without talking, listening to the way the station now contains 2 times at once, the parish bell's habit still in people's pockets, and the regulator's clean new count behind glass. The telegraph clicks a gossip of far places. The engine nudges itself, eager. You could come with us, Otto says lightly, as if suggesting a walk after dinner. The company is making a list of men who can make clocks obey. Inspector for the line, proper pay, steel instead of village dust. We would argue about minutes from one end of the canton to the other. I have a tower that needs reminding and a baker who believes bread watches the sun, Jakob says, no anger in it. And a boy who keeps from knocking the bezel off most of the time. And a watch that has been waiting for a certain piece of steel to come home. Otto nods, as if he expected this exact refusal and has already made peace with it. Then I will bring you more springs and more trouble, and you will write me letters that smell of oil. He pulls a small flask from his coat, touches it to Jakob's knuckles, and tucks it away. To father's stubborn note. To father's note, Jakob agrees. The guard calls, the whistle answers, the couplings tighten into a single thought. Jakob walks Otto down the platform. The brothers touch forearms again. There is no other way to say anything worth saying between men who know the same house and learn to tell time by the same tick. Then Otto steps up and is taken, the carriage door closing with the soft authority of the last word in a sentence. The train gathers itself, steel writing its own grammar on the rails, and leans into the valley's curve, its lamp shrinking, its breath becoming cloud, then lace, then nothing. Inside, Gzell locks the regulator's glass. The second's hand goes on making its small, important circles. The public dial on the gable holds its new truth like a coin behind glass. A boy in the waiting room sets his tin soldier by it and salutes. Frau Biri checks her baker's watch again and decides the oven will not care. Jakob stands a moment alone with the sounder and the pendulum. He looks at the staff in its tissue and at the empty place he has kept for it in his mind so long it had begun to feel like furniture. He pockets the tin carefully, folds the oiled paper square on square, and slides it into his coat. Thank you, Meister, Gzell says, writing the last line in today's book. Tomorrow the complaints will come, and the day after, fewer, and the week after, none. Tomorrow, Jakob says, and thinks of Frau Keller at noon, of the bell speaking, of bread rising without asking Frankfurt's permission, of a boy's hands finally steady, of a watch that will say yes for more than 6 brave beats. Snow starts again as he steps into the square. The parish clock is quiet now, its duty done until the next hour. Behind him, under glass, the regulator ticks the long, level sentence of the company's time. In his pocket, the Le Pen lies still beside the little cylinder of steel that might teach it to remember. He walks toward the workshop, and the town walks with him, learning in the same evening to keep 2 kinds of promises at once. Snow freckles the lamplight as Jakob lets himself back into the workshop. The square is a pewter hush. The only sound is the soft knit and unravel of flakes against the shutters. Inside, warmth meets him with the smell of oil and alder smoke. He sets the bolt, lays his hat on the peg, and places the oiled paper parcel on the bench, as if it were a bird he means to wake without startling. He draws the lamp close and trims the wick until the flame becomes a steady almond. Shadows climb the pegboard, brooches, burnishes, tweezers like notation on a stave. He opens the tin, lifts the small cylinder wrapped in tissue, and lets the balance staff fall into his palm. Bright steel, shoulders turned to a grammar his hands understand without translation. Beside it, the old note in his father's square script, for the lépine if the pivots give up again. The paper smells faintly of walnut and years. He opens the mahogany box. The lépine lies on its felt, white dial untroubled, hands at a polite 10 past. He presses the catch and the back snaps with the modest pride of silver. The movement winks up, a city of tiny bridges and streets and wheels. He winds 2 turns. The balance makes 6 brave beats and quits, like a man crossing a stream on ice that will not hold him. Soon, Jacob says, and means it this time. He clears the bench. Keller's breadcrumb rag folded away. Baumgartner's spent crystal swept into the small porcelain dish marked glass. The cat shooed from the warmest corner with apologies. He sets the staking set square to the lamp, oak block, steel stakes, round anvil with holes like a constellation. On a felt pad he lays out the order of the watch's heart as he will unmake it. Balance cock, balance complete, hairspring, roller table, staff. He turns the loop into his right eye. The world obliges by becoming exact. First, the balance cock. A single screw gives with a sigh. He lifts the cock by the rim, not the spring. The balance winks free on its pivot, then droops. The worn staff complains. He weights the train with a slip of paper and lets the pallet hold the escape. The hairspring stud screw is a dot of dark. He lyses it, breathing through his nose, and eases the blue ribbon free, counting the coils without counting, 12 and a breath. He marks the collet's orientation with a scratch on the rim of the balance. The beat must come home to where it began. The roller table next. He warms the table with the merest ghost of heat from the spirit lamp until Shellac remembers it can be persuaded. He clamps the balance arm in the roller remover and lifts the table straight up with the carefulness of a man pulling a splinter from a child. The impulse jewel, a sliver of red glass, winks, still true in its slot. He sets the roller in a little saucer lined with cork. It rocks content. Now the old staff. He chooses the right hole in the anvil, rests the balance on it with the hub supported. The punch he picks is not a hammer but a fingertip made of steel. 2 light taps, the old rivet swells and gives. The staff drops with a tiny metallic sigh onto the paper he has laid beneath to catch proud things. He holds the freed balance to the lamplight. The rim is good, no kink where grief might have left a mark. He touches the edge with the back of a fingernail and feels the balance's particular springiness, the way you feel the health of a bow. Good. He measures the new staff against the old with his brass gauge. Auto cylinder is exactly as the note says it should be. He seats it through the hub, shoulder home, cone true. The riveting punch he chooses has a face ground to a curve learned by apprenticeship and stubbornness. He feels for the swell beneath his fingertips more than he sees it, a bloom of metal that says, "We belong to one another now." When he holds the assembly up, the rivet line is a tidy circle, neither proud nor mean. Poising, the honest humbling part. He sets the balance on knife edges and watches. The heavy spot declares itself by a patient swing to the same low place. He marks the top with a dot of chalk, turns the graver in his hand, and breathes once before touching metal. A dust's worth. He tests again. The swing is smaller. Another whisper of bright shaves from the rim. Again, until at last the balance comes to rest where he left it, indifferent to direction. He smiles, the small, private kind that does not trouble the rest of his face. Outside, a cart rattles once along the lane and hushes. Somewhere, farther off, a cheer goes up at the inn for a reason Ale knows and reason does not need. The parish clock drops 6 strokes into the snow. Under glass at the station, the regulator disagrees by a minute and 19 seconds without apology. The town contains 2 noons and 2 sixes. Jakob's bench contains 1, the beat he will make. He warms the roller table again and presses it home on the staff's lower cone, setting the jewel square to the arm. The shellac sweats and cools, becoming what it wishes to be, a decision made. He slips the hairspring collet back onto the staff, aligning the scratch to the arm, the way his father taught him. Always give the spring back the world it knew. He repins the stud to the cock, checks the flatness of the spring against a card's edge, breath held until the coil lies like a calm thought. Before he marries heart to body again, he cleans the jewel holes with a sliver of pithwood, oils the stones with a drop fine enough to be ashamed of itself if asked to be seen, checks the drawer on the pallets with a tickling finger, and aligns the banking pins until the escape wheel teeth fall and lift with eagerness instead of vanity. He places the balance back under the cock, teasing the pivot into the lower jewel with a motion between sight and touch, then lowers the cock and feels the upper jewel accept the cone. The screw tightens, the world shrinks to the next breath. He winds a quarter turn and nudges the rim. The balance swings, the impulse jewel finds the pallet fork, the fork kisses the notch, the escape wheel walks, and suddenly the movement is not parts but a sum. Beat, 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 beat. It runs, high and slightly anxious. He tilts the watch vertical, it runs. Pendant right, it runs. Pendant left, it runs. He lays it dial down. The amplitude fattens, pleased with itself. "Good evening, father," he says to the ticks, not unkind. "You've been stubborn long enough." He slides the watch against the regulator's seconds card, counts under his breath with the seconds hand under glass, and hears the lepine run a hair fast eager after its long silence. He lengthens the active length of the hairspring by the width of a hair, loosening the collet and turning it a trait, setting the beat so the tick and tock are equal, not a drunkard's sway. He listens again. The little animal breathes more evenly now, less like a hare and more like a cat who has finally found the stove. He lets it run while he cleans his tools. He writes the day's last line in the ledger, Lepine, Staff replaced fathers. Beat set by regulator. Trial overnight. The ink makes a small lake in the goose quill's scratch. He blows once gently. The cat reclaims the corner of the stove with the proprietary sigh of all cats. A knock at the door, soft, quick, then the bolt lifts before he can stand. Leo pokes his head in, cheeks pink, hair fretted with snow. Meister, Mama said to bring you a jar of soup before you forget you have a stomach. He holds up a lidded crock with both hands and the expression of someone entrusted with a jewel. Also, the inn is saying the railway has stolen a minute from Winter, and the baker says if the company thinks dough rises by telegram, they can come knead it themselves. Tell your mother that her soup is the finest standard, Jakob says, taking the crock. Steam fogs his loop. As for stolen minutes, we had minutes to spare. The sun keeps more than it needs. Leo's gaze has already strayed to the open case on the bench. Is that the one that won't? He asks, stepping closer with reverent caution. It would not, Jakob says. It does now. He tilts the watch so the boy can see the balance breathe. Leo leans in until his breath threatens to fog the jewels, then clamps his mouth shut and inhales through his nose like a diver. The tic settles into him. His shoulders drop in the way of those who have learned something wordless. Will you set it to the station or the bell? He asks, not unshrewd, still watching the rim swing. To what matters where I stand, Jakob answers, and the boy grins at the riddle he already knows the shape of. Good night, Meister. Leo's boots squeak out and his voice trails him down the lane, telling the soup he saved a town. Jakob sits again, cradling the crock in his hands for the heat as much as the food. He eats with the spoon he keeps tucked in the drawer with the burnishers, eyes on the watch as if it were a child sleeping. He imagines his mother's face when he brings it, ticking, and her scold that sounds like a blessing. He imagines Otto's letter, more springs, more trouble, and the way the station's seconds hand clicked under his fingers to a time that came from elsewhere and insisted on belonging here. The inn across the square casts a yellow rectangle on the snow. Voices rise and fall, complaints about the company, jokes about the parish bell, practical suggestions about waking roosters with telegrams. He smiles into his spoon. The town will learn. It always has. First you argue with the world, then you teach your hands to make the argument useful. He sets the Le Pen face up on the leather pad by the regulator, where the two beats can speak to one another all night. He dims the lamp, leaves the stove with a last billet for courage, and carries the ledger upstairs. Before sleep, he stands at the window a moment. Snow makes saints of roofs. The tower shoulder is a quiet, pale thing against the sky. From the station, faintly, a telegraph tick writes a conversation he cannot read and does not need to. He lies down and listens. The shop below is a choir. Regulator's long vowel, Lepin's light consonant, Long Case's old baritone. Somewhere between them all is his father's steady irritation and affection. Somewhere in the mix is a new note he recognizes as his own. Just before sleep finds him, he remembers something small and stands again, annoyed at his own memory for its timing. He goes back down in stocking feet, cold biting his ankles, and opens the bench drawer for the little brass timing washers, the ones that seat under a screw when a balance needs one more whisper of fairness. He does not use them yet. He sets them beside the staff's tissue, a promise to tomorrow. "A trial overnight," he murmurs, and lets the two beats speak to the dark. The night gathers around the workshop the way a hand cups a candle. Under glass at the station, the company's seconds flow with their distant certainty. On the tower, the bell waits to say what the town believes. On Jacob's bench, the old Lépine says yes to the world again. Not loudly, but exactly. And the sound threads itself into the same cloth as the snow and the stove, and the breath of a sleeping street. Tomorrow, there will be complaints and adjustments and more small obediences asked of stubborn metal. Tonight, there is this. A watch that would not, now does. A minute stolen from winter that will be spent on bread and trains alike. And a man who knows which time to keep when the town asks him to keep all of them. Morning arrives as a pale hush, the kind that makes a town sound farther away than it is. Frost has laced the inside corners of Jacob's bedroom window. The square below is a sheet of linen someone forgot to fold. He lies still long enough to count the shop's distant voices. Long case, regulator, the new light consonant of the Lépine. And then he is up, blanket folded, boots found with the quick accuracy of hands that have learned where things live. Downstairs, the iron stove sighs itself back to life. He trims the lamp, sets a kettle on the plate, and goes first not to the ledger, not to the door, but to the bench. The Lépine sits where he left it, face up on the soft pad beside his timing card, breathing small, exact syllables into the empty room. He listens the way doctors listen, head tipped a fraction, eyes not quite on the thing that matters. Tick, tick, tick even. He places it face down. Tick, 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 still even, amplitude plump. Pendant right, pendant left, crown up. The beat keeps its courage in each posture like a man who knows his answer in any room. He takes the regulator's seconds and counts quietly as the station's time announces itself under glass in the mind's ear. Overnight rate 3 seconds fast by his card. Eager metal, proud after sleep. He loosens the collet a breath, lengthens the active hair by a whisper, and test again. Still fast but less so, 1 second now. He opens the drawer of tiny brass timing washers and hesitates, then closes it. Not yet. Let it live today and tell its truth. He notes the numbers in the ledger in the careful, unhurried hand his father insisted on. Lépine trial, plus 3 seconds overnight. Adjusted, target 0 to +2. The kettle throws a shouldered sound at the lid. He pours water over grounds into the little enamel pot that has survived 3 sets of hands and twice as many arguments. Coffee and oil and cold iron join their smells and improve each other. He drinks standing, looking through the open shutter. The baker's boy has already tracked a braid of prints through the square. The inn door opens and exhales a gust of talk and yeast. Snow slips from the apothecary's awning with a soft report and startles no one. By 8, the first knock. Frau Beery herself, flower on her sleeves, face bright with the defiance of those who have been awake longer than clocks. She sets a small kitchen clock on the bench, tin case, enamel dial smudged where fingers have tapped it impatiently. If Frankfurt says it's 1 minute and 19, then my loaves are all born early, she announces. I will not argue with railways, but my dough does not take telegrams. Can you make me something that listens only to my oven? A timer that minds heat, not bells, Jakob says, turning the clock in his hands. The balance limps. The case smells faintly of cinnamon. He thinks of sand and glass and the way flour remembers touch. An hourglass, he adds, more to himself than to her. Eggs worth, dough's worth, bread's worth. 3 sizes. You hang them where heat can't scold them. I will pay in bread, she says, already winning the argument. You always do. He smiles and writes Bieri, 3 glasses, egg, dough, loaf into the ledger. Leave this one. It will keep the shop honest in the meantime. He resets her kitchen clock to the regulator, turns the beat, oils the jewel with a drop of patience. When she leaves, she puts a still warm roll on the stove and pretends she forgot to. Leo arrives a step behind her, hair carrying snow the way a stray carries twigs, uninvited, unapologetic. He stamps his boots at the threshold, remembers, and stamps outside instead. Morning, Meister. The station master's man says the mayor wants you at the Rathaus before noon. Something about which bell is to be boss of which hour he says it with relish. Drama that smells of coal is better than any storybook. We will give the mayor a choice he can bear, Jakob answers, which is his way of saying he has not decided whom to annoy first. Sweep. Then lay out the hourglass molds. We will teach sand to keep bread's time, they work quietly. Leo dusts the bench, polishes the regulator's glass with the cloth that lives only for that purpose, and brings the wooden molds down from the shelf. 2 turned cups that kiss at the waist, a pinch that will become the throat. Jakob chooses a jar of sand he keeps for work that should not argue. The fine, dry kind he sifted from a bag he bought off a mason. He dries a tray by the stove, measures spoonfuls, times the first fall with the long case's seconds. The molds get a breath of lamp heat. The first trial runs in a slow, grainy ribbon from top to bottom in 2 minutes, and a kindness. He adjusts the pinch with a file until the line runs exactly at 3. There is satisfaction in teaching matter to remember. The morning is a procession of small treaties. A school teacher with a classroom clock that refuses to agree with his slate. A tinsmith who, humiliated by last night's public dial, asks for a cheap watch with a heart that will not laugh at him in front of his apprentice. A farmer bringing a regulator weight in both hands like a baby and saying, "It fell." Jakob restores what can be restored, writes down what must be ordered, and refuses to say out loud what the farmer already knows about hooks and common sense. Near 11, a different knock, 2 brisk official raps that belong to the Rathaus. The mayor himself stands in the door, his hat holding a shallow snowfall. Behind him, bareheaded, cheeks punished by weather and company temper both, Station Master Giselle. Beside them, Herr Vogt the sexton, cap in hand. The room suddenly contains all the town's hours at once. Meister Amsler, the mayor says, coming directly to the part where a decision will be required. We are a town with 2 noons. The baker's boy came late to school and says it was early. The coachman swears the train left in the middle of the quarter. The council would like a harmony. The council would like fewer letters from Zurich, Gzell adds dryly, then softens. And fewer grandmothers shaking their walking sticks at my dial. Vogt looks between them, half anxious, half proud of his bell. The tower was slow. Yesterday we made it honest. Today the station says we are traitors to the timetable. I keep the rope, not the sky. Jakob lets them finish their first sentences, the ones men have to say before they can say what they mean. He removes his loop and sets it down, a gesture that tells the room it has his eyes. The tower belongs to the square, he says. The station belongs to the rails. Yesterday, I gave the parish noon that matched the notary's book. Today, the station counts for trains that cannot smell our snow. He looks at Gazelle. Can your regulator give us a daily pulse we can hear? The sounder marks the minute from the city, Gzell says. It clicks the top if the wire is kind. Then this. Each day at noon, when the Angelus is done, we listen to your click, Jakob says. I will shorten the pendulum to match that beat. The tower will speak the company's hour, and the square will keep 1 time. In the bakery we will hang an hourglass that obeys flour. In this shop we will keep cards for sun and for rail. People will learn which pocket to trust. He says it as if he were arranging tools on a pegboard. The mayor's mouth does the arithmetic of politics. So the tower will be the railway's man, he says, trying the sentence first as complaint, then as announcement. The tower will be the town's, Jakob says. A town with a station is a different town. We should learn its name while we can still pronounce it. Gzell nods once, grateful that someone else has said it. Vogt looks at the floorboards and then up, shoulders loosening as if a weight he did not admit to has been moved a finger's width. Done, the mayor says, deciding quickly so that he can claim later it was his idea. Today, then. The Angelus. Make it tidy, Meister. When they've gone, the shop feels larger, as if the door they took their noise through leads to a different winter. Leo stands with the broom in his hands like a flag and grins. So the bell will listen to the wire, he says. That will make the old men at the inn speak poems. It will make them speak louder, Jakob says, smiling despite himself. Poetry is extra. They work until the bell beckons them. At 5 to noon, he shrugs into his coat, pockets a small steel key and a timing card with today's offset, and takes the narrow back steps to the tower as he has since he could barely carry his own shadow. The air inside is stone-cold rope-smelling. Vogt meets him on the landing with a look that is half fear, half mischief. You'll make her proud, the sexton mutters, and Jakob thinks that for some men bells are sisters. Up in the clock room, the movement waits, patient as a cow that has decided to be milked. He stops the train with 2 fingers. Silence falls like a held breath. From his pocket, faint but certain, The station's minute clicks. 1, 2, 3, then the long top. He shortens the pendulum by a thread and a thread, starts the train, and listens to the beat step into the river the company sends through the wire. On the platform below, the mayor stands with his hat in his hands like a man at a christening. The Angelus chimes its threes in their old cadence. Then the hour falls, 12 clean strokes spaced to the regulator's law. In the square, heads tip, not quite knowing why the number feels sharper, only that it does. At the bakery door, Frau Beery says, "There," to no one in particular and flips a tray. In the schoolroom, the teacher holds up a finger and says, "Listen," and the class hears both time and lesson. At the station, Gzell marks noon in his book and writes a small private note. Tower Beats Company. In the inn, an old man lifts a glass and declares the end of the world. Then he drinks to it with relief. Back in the shop, the Lepin has made its own peace with the day. A Jakob checks it against the regulator and smiles at the smallest success a man can earn. The overnight pride has settled. It now runs a touch slow face down and a touch fast crown up, an honesty he respects. He removes the balance once more, lifts a screw, tucks a washer that weighs less than a crumb under its head, and replaces it. The next trial, close to even across positions, 2 seconds to the good on the bench. He closes the case, and for the first time since it died at 2:17, the watch feels like a creature that wants to live where people live. He cleans his hands, warms a little sealing wax at the lamp, and with a pin scratches 3 letters and a date inside the back, where only a son or a thief with bad manners will ever look. J.A. 18-12 ***. He hesitates, then adds a single dot after the year for something he cannot name. He winds 2 turns, listens, and slips the watch into the pocket of his waistcoat, where it belongs by inheritance more than by cloth. The afternoon brings its ordinary storms. A letter from Otto on company paper, 2 lines in a diagram, a joke about bread trained by telegrams. A boy from the school with a slate and a solemn message from the teacher. Thank you for the noon. Leo, fighting the urge to explode, holds out the first of the finished hourglasses with both hands. The sand runs in a quiet, obedient spine. When the last grain slips, the boy inhales like someone who has seen a trick without feeling tricked. Bread time, he says, proud. Shall I carry it to Frau Beery? Go, Jakob says, and the shop brightens an almost imperceptible degree as the boy vanishes with the hour stitched to his chest. He eats his supper standing, a slice of cheese, an apple, a second roll he pretends he earned by considering it for an hour. He looks at the darkening square, at the tower shoulder, at the faint gloss of the station window. The town is learning to carry 2 truths. That time can be sent through a wire and that dough swells when it means to. His work, he thinks, not for the first time, is not to pick a side, but to give people hands they can trust in either weather. As evening lowers its lid, a familiar figure appears at the door. Frau Keller, shawl drawn close, the silver chain at her throat catching the last of the day. She stands a long moment before speaking, the way people do when they have come to a place to let their mouths be quiet. They said his name, she says at last. And the watch said nothing about it, which was everything. Jacob bows his head in acknowledgement of a thing well done that is not his doing. If it falters in the night, he says, bring it. We will scold it together. It kept me, she answers. Not him. She sets a paper parcel on the bench, something with weight and kindness, and goes without waiting to be thanked. When he unwraps it later, it is a wedge of cake with too much spice for winter, the kind people bake when they want to talk to their dead and remember sweetness instead. He eats it with the lépine ticking under his thumb and thinks of his mother, who will scold the cake for being extravagant and then ask for another slice. The hour creeps toward dusk. He lights the outer lamp, sets the closed plank, and sits a while with the regulator's long, even sentence filling the space between the shop's old heart and the station's new one. Then he takes the mahogany box, opens it, and finds it empty in the best possible way. The watch is on him now in the warm pocket near his ribs, keeping a truth that belongs to neither tower nor rail, but to rooms and hands and names read at parish doors. Tomorrow he will carry it to his mother. He imagines the moment she holds the case to her ear, the way her breath will change. He imagines too the lecture that will follow on the proper use of pockets and sons. He smiles, puts out the lamp, and listens to the 2 noons in his head become a single evening, the kind that teaches you, without ceremony, which time matters where you stand. Morning is blue and exact. The snowfall has ended. The sky has been scrubbed to a hard, bright enamel that makes the mountains look nearer than they are. Frost rims the inside of the window like script. In the square, a broom makes careful paths through white, bristles whispering to cobble. Jacob wakes to the workshop's choir, long case, regulator, and waits for the new voice. The lépine answers, light and regular, a consonant tucked neatly between the vowels. He does not dress all at once. He stands a moment with his hands on the sill and listens to the town try on its new hour. Somewhere a sled's runners hiss, somewhere else a door bangs and a woman laughs at the way cold eats sound. He is up then, blanket folded, boots found by the method of habit, and down the stairs to the bench. The lépine has run all night by itself, which is a sentence he did not dare to think yesterday. He tries it in positions again, face up, face down, pendant right, left, and it keeps its courage. Against the regulator's seconds card he counts 1, 2, 3, 1 second slow overnight. He makes a note in the ledger. Trial day 1, -1 second, leave and closes the drawer on the washes he will not use yet. A watch that greets morning with modesty will often keep company through winter. Coffee wakes in the enamel pot. He drinks leaning on the bench, watching steam unwind, and thinks of a kitchen farther up the valley where his mother sets water to boil without looking, because her hands know where every whistle lives. He touches the pocket where the lépine will ride today and feels the weight correctly, neither heavy with duty nor light with fear. The decision is not a decision. It is a path taken by a foot that already knows the stone. The bell at the door announces Leo the way dawn announces itself. a bright series of notes that do not apologize for being early. Snow frets the boy's hair. He has a small parcel under his arm, wrapped in brown paper with a string that looks like it has been argued into a knot. "From Frau Beery," he says, triumphant. Bedtime, the big one. She says it falls true. Her old men swore at Frankfurt and then ate on the company's schedule without noticing. Bread has always been quicker to forgive than men, Jakob says. He opens the parcel and lifts the largest of the hourglasses, the loaf, and watches the sand fall in a soft, obedient thread. Take the medium one to the inn kitchen after the Angelus. Do not demonstrate its use over the soup Leo inhales to promise, then remembers promises are heavy and lets the air out as a grin instead. "Or will you go to the tower again?" "After," Jakob says. "First, my mother." He packs simply, the mahogany box empty because the watch is on him now, a clean cloth, the ledger left open on the bench with a pencil laid like a bookmark across today's work, a heel of bread in his pocket because one should not arrive at a mother's house looking too pleased with oneself. He sets the out plank on the door, writes Rathaus Tower back by dusk, in small letters no one but Leo will read, and steps into the bright cold. The square makes a ceremony of ordinary things. A woman shakes a rug and casts sequins of frost into the sun. A boy drags a sled with a decisive official air. The tailor stands in his doorway holding his own pocket watch in his palm, face turned toward the station window as if time were a weather to be taken. The public dial on the gable holds its minute and 19 seconds ahead, like a secret it has decided not to keep. Herr Vogt is at the tower door, knotting and unknotting his scarf until it admits it has met its match. "She sounded cleaner yesterday," he says without being asked, meaning the bell. But the sound fell in a straight line. People stood still to hear it. "They will walk again," Jakob says. But the sound will stay straight. The path up valley is the same path he has walked since his legs were young enough to argue with distance. Through the narrow street where shutters lean close to each other for warmth, past the sawyer's yard where planks sleep under snow, along the river where water runs black and fast and refuses to admit that winter has opinions. His breath makes a small engine. His boots take the world in careful bites. Above the town, the light opens. Snow throws the sun back at itself. Birches draw graphite lines on white. Halfway, he meets a neighbor with a sled and two small children arranged on it like parcels. "To your mother's?" the man asks. Not because he does not know, but because paths like conversation need a start. "To my mother's," Jakob says, and the man nods as if this explains roads, weather, and the persistence of bread. The farmhouse is a shoulder of wood under a roof of snow. Geraniums sleep in clay pots against the south wall, their leaves the stubborn green of things that refuse to let winter have the last word. Smoke finds its way from the chimney as if it had to remember each bend. Jakob does not knock. He opens the door to a room that smells of soup and spun wool and the particular spice that belongs to houses that have kept the same shape through generations. "You're late," his mother says at once, which means, "You are exactly on time," in the language she taught him at the same desk where he learned to read. She stands at the hearth with a wooden spoon, and a look that has traveled unaltered through 3 faces to arrive at his today. She is smaller than he remembers when he has not seen her for a week, which is his fault and not Time's. "You are not wearing the scarf I made you." "It catches in gears," he says, kissing the air near her cheek because both of them believe displays of public affection are vulgar, even in private. He takes the spoon, stirs the pot in the direction she likes, and listens to the soup speak, cabbage and potato, the modest comfort of winter. She pretends not to notice he knows the dance. "That boy," she says, watching him stir. "The narrow one with the hands, he comes to the pump like a soldier. I told him to carry water in 2 pails if he meant to grow evenly. He told me time grows sideways when he is working. What does this mean?" "It means his head has found its work," Jacob says. He reaches into his waistcoat and presses the lépine there, a touch so private it does not count as a gesture. "I brought you something. If it is the cake I sent to Frau Keller, I will hit you with your father's shoe," she says sharply, which is a joke if you know her and not a joke if you do not. He sets the spoon down, takes the watch from his pocket, and opens the back without looking away from her face. The beat leans into the room with the authority of a voice that has already introduced itself. His mother does not reach for it at once. She squares her shoulders and lifts her chin, small adjustments that older women make when they are about to forgive the world for something. He sets the watch in her palm. She closes her fingers around the case and brings it to her ear. The change that comes over her is not a fall or a break. It is the easing of a knot that had been tied too tight for too long. Her mouth moves, forming a shape that might be his father's name and might be bread or snow, a syllable that asks nothing and answers everything. "How?" she asks finally, the spoon forgotten, the soup not daring to scorch. "Otto found a note in father's chest." A staff he turned and hid from time. "I set it where it wanted to be." The spring decided not to be proud today. She opens the back with the same firm gentleness she used on children and jars and stubborn men. Inside, the movement winks, bridges crossing bridges. At the edge, scratched with a pin in tiny, careful letters, are the initials and date he put there last night. Her eyebrow rises when she sees them. "You put your name in the house," she says. "I put a date on a returning thing," he answers. So when someone asking why it runs finds the back, they will know it belonged to this winter. She snaps the case shut and clips the watch to the chain she keeps pinned inside her bodice, his father's chain, and slips the case into the small pocket sewn there. The sound is a little muffled now, which seems right. "You may come on Sundays and wind it," she says briskly, which means this will live where I live, and you will visit me to be scolded. They eat soup with spoons that have learned their mouths. They share the bread he brought without mentioning that it is not as good as the bread she bakes in the same oven she has spoken to for 30 years. They discuss Otto, his letters, his neatness, his habit of arriving with troubles and springs. She declares the railway a useful impertinence. He tells her the town will listen to a wire at noon. She tells him the town has always listened to whatever makes the most noise first, and the most sense later. After dinner, while she polishes the ladle with a cloth that used to be a shirt he outgrew, a neighbor knocks. Herr Imboden, hat in both hands, hair making a map of wind. Frau Amsler, he says, stepping inside. Forgive me, but the black forest clock in our hallway says prayers at the half and curses at the hour. If the Meister is here, he is, Jacob's mother says, not moving. And he will be if you can climb the step to the kitchen. The clock hangs in the neighbor's hall like a wooden cautionary tale, painted front, pine case, 2 pine cone weights that have become daggers over the years. It groans out a half strike when Jakob sets it a minute forward. At the hour, it attempts 12 and finds 13 before it can change its mind. A slipping rack, he says. He pulls a chair under it, steps up, lifts the hood, and loses himself in the lost world of carved levers. The rack tail is lifting shy of the snail. A bent pin argues against reason. He sets the pin back with a pair of pliers as delicate as a surgeon's apology. The next hour, when he tests it by letting the minute hand run, the clock speaks 12 like a sober man. Herr Imboden's relief fills the hall like steam. He produces a coin. Jakob refuses it. Imboden leaves with promises of a ham in spring, which is an agreement older than money. Back in the kitchen, his mother has cut him a slice of a cake she claims she does not bake well, and which makes him remember every good winter he knows. She watches him eat the way a woman watches a clock she has not decided to trust. The station man wrote us, she says, as if it were a weather report. He wants you to draw wages for telling a big clock what time it is. Will you? I prefer small rebellions, Jakob says. He means Leo watching a hairspring. He means Frau Beery's hourglass. He means this room with the watch against his mother's ribs. The station will have me when it must. For now it will have my ear. She nods once, satisfied that he has chosen in the only way that counts, quietly, without making the choice a song. Your father would have wanted to argue and then have agreed, she says. He liked being right and liked you more. He helps her carry a basket of kindling to the wood box and ties the rope on the shed door because he cannot help repairing anything that asks. When he has finished inventing small good reasons to stay, he puts on his coat. His mother kisses the air where his cheek will be and says, "Bring the boy on Sunday." I will test his wrists, he laughs and promises. The walk down is quicker. Gravity wants its share. The town below glitters in a way that has more to do with people agreeing than ice. In the square, the mayor is explaining to a man with a horse why a minute belongs to a timetable and a loaf belongs to an oven. The man with the horse nods the way a person nods when he intends to do as he likes and call it compliance. At the station, Gzell is already at the telegraph, pencil poised. He glances up when Jakob enters, relief showing itself as humor. They did not keep you for soup and lectures. They kept me for both, Jakob says. The sounder clicks, dry, purposeful. The top mark comes. Together they listen. Together they watch the regulator's seconds hand meet the wire's beat. A tower is still honest from yesterday, Gzell says, making a line in his book. There will be fewer letters from Zurich, and more from bakers, Jakob answers. Or we have made an arrangement with flour. It seems satisfied, he stops at the bakery. The shop is warm to the lungs. Frau Beery has hung the largest hourglass on a peg near the door, where heat will not bully it. The sand makes a steady domestic river. Loaf time, she announces, tapping the glass with the proprietary pride of a woman whose dough obeys her and no one else. The old men say it is witchcraft. I told them witches do not keep ledgers. Leo appears from behind the sacks of flour with the medium glass held upright like a candle. In time, he says, serious, and the baker crosses herself playfully, then presses a bun into his hand with a "don't you dare argue" look he would be a fool to test. Dusk finds the shop again. Inside, breath and iron. Jakob sets the open plank back to closed, takes off his coat and listens to the room reset itself. The long case's baritone, the regulator's long vowel, and, most astonishing still, though the surprise has worn down to gratitude, the Lepine's clear syllable going on and on from the buttoned pocket of his mother's dress across the valley. He hears it not with his ears, but with the way a day keeps itself in a chest. He writes his last line in the ledger, tower matched to wire at Angelus, daily. Beery, glasses delivered in medium. Imboden rackpin set. A mother, Lepin returned, Sunday winding. He sands the page with a pinch of ground pumice, shakes the dust into his palm, and lets it fall into the small porcelain dish that keeps such things for a future he can never quite name. Before bed, he opens the drawer where the tissue lies that held the balance staff, empty now except for a smear of oil and a memory of steel. He folds it again, square upon square, and leaves it there, not as relic, but as reminder that sometimes a watch waits for a piece turned years ago, left in a chest by a man who believed in careful pivots and stubborn suns. He blows out the lamp. The town settles. Under glass at the station, the company's seconds go on being themselves. On the tower, the bell waits to make noon into a public idea. In kitchens, sand learns bread, and in one farmhouse, a woman sleeps with a silver beat near her heart. In the room above the workshop, Jakob lies awake a little longer than he needs to, and then not, the day keeping time without him until morning comes to ask for the next adjustment. Fog comes on felt feet, not like a storm, but like a thought that forgets to leave. By afternoon, the mountains have disappeared. The river is only a sound. Snow softens into a skin of water that turns the square to pewter. Boots write dark commas and then blur. Even the bell's last hour seems to hang lower, as if weight could soak up weather. Jakob feels the weather before he sees it. The workshop's sounds are closer than usual. The regulator's long vowel seems to come from his sleeve. Oil smells sharper, alder smoke sits lower. He is burnishing a verge from a schoolroom clock. Nothing delicate, just honest steel that has decided to remember friction. When Leo appears in the doorway, hair haloed with damp. "Meister," the boy says, already excited enough to forget the mat for his boots. The station's insect is quiet. It takes Jakob a beat to translate. Then he hears it too. Not the silence, but the absence of a small, dry talk in the edges of the afternoon. No telegraph clicks. The wire has gone under weather. Gzell confirms it in 5 strides worth of hallway. The station master's coat is wet to the elbow. His tone is the near cheer of a man trying to keep panic from borrowing a chair. Ice on the sag, a pole down between here and Koreans, he says. The company's minute isn't arriving for Vespers. We have a goods train to turn and a mail to send against the gorge. If Zurich asks what time we left, I should like to say something that won't make ink spit. The regulator behind glass keeps its own counsel, pendulum breathing, seconds hand moving with the exact miniature arrogance it required yesterday. Gzell taps the case with a knuckle as if to remind it that beauty is no excuse. How close are you, Meister, if you bring the town's time in your pocket? Jakob thinks of the bench regulator across the square, of the daily card he keeps, offsets neat and layered, of his travelling lever, honest as bread, that he sets by habit to the tower each noon. No wire today. No sun either. Fog has eaten the sky whole. He thinks of his father's answer to the same question on a different winter. Close enough to apologize only once. Close, Jacob says. We will make the station presentable. Tomorrow the wire can scold us for our effort. They work with the doors shut to keep the damp from laying a hand on brass. Jakob winds the station regulator, feels the weight of the train settle into tendon, steadies the beat with a thumb against the crutch, left a hair long, right a hair long, until the tick and tock meet precisely in the middle of the room. He draws from his breast pocket the travelling lever he keeps not for pride but for humility, and places it on the table beside Gzell's book. He checks it against his own seconds card, which he wrote at Angelus when the tower spoke clean. The difference sits like a grain of salt on the tongue. Small, present, not an argument. Advance 1, Gzell says, ready with the pencil. Advance 1, Jakob agrees. He stops the pendulum on its inward swing, moves the minute hand exactly a minute to agree with what his pocket and his card believe, then whispers 19 seconds forward as if telling a child a secret. He releases the pendulum. The beat finds itself at once, proud of its own coherence. The seconds hand meets the next imagined click from the wire. There is no click, but their ears supply it from habit and hope. Outside, fog erases the platform's far lamp. From time to time, a shape comes out of milk and becomes a man, a sack, a cart. The engine breathes behind its veil like a waiting animal. Leo stands in the doorway, unwilling to be shooed, holding the incised hourglass by its waist, sand sleeping in the upper bell like a thought before it falls. I take that to Frau Moser, Jakob tells him. I tell her to time the dumplings, not the mayor. Leo's grin is a bright vowel. He vanishes into weather as if swallowed by a generous ghost. Word moves the way word always moves, through flower shops and across pump handles, by way of a woman's mouth to another woman's ear. By the time Jacob steps back across the square to his bench regulator, men in the inn are already telling each other how the line failed because the company underpaid whoever nails ice off poles, and bakers are already saying that dumplings have obeyed steam longer than telegraph and will go on doing so. The air tastes like wet wool and iron. At the bench, he does not change a thing. He writes another line on the day's card. Wire out 1600, station set by bench plus card. And tucks the card under the regulator's frame, a small testimony that mistakes can be honest. Then he watches the pendulum a single full minute, not because he doubts it, but because the quiet minute is the right tool for the job ahead. Rathaus, says the square at the edge of hearing. Rathaus, repeats the cat with the air of someone who wished someone had asked her first. The mayor's clerk stands at the door, hat in hand, Fogg having discovered parts of his hair he did not know were available. The council asks for a sign, he says. People come to the hall asking what now? We have a chalkboard and nerves. Then put the chalkboard where a clock would be ashamed to stand, Jakob says. I'll write you a minute no one can mistake. They hang the slate under the Rathaus eaves where market notices go and money finds its second thoughts. Fog blows through like breath in a cold room. Jacob borrows the teacher's yardstick and draws a long horizontal line, then ticks for seconds, then a fat mark for the top, a ship's bell without a ship. The line is straight enough to be believed. He writes, in a hand that even old men with pride can read, when the tower strikes the Angelus, count this line slowly to the end. The last mark is the station's noon. A child reads it aloud for his mother. The mother says, "What if the fog eats counting?" And the child says, "Then we will start again." Will they do it? The clerk asks, skeptical only because it is his job. They will do it once, Jakob says. And that is enough. The Angelus lands out of cloud, its threes strangely intimate in fog. People stop because the air tells them to. Jakob stands under the slate with his hand hovering like a conductor's. He begins, voice low, a steady 1-2 of seconds, not performative, just true. Others join, women first, then boys, then the men, embarrassed to be counting and unwilling not to. At the end he says, "Now," and somewhere in the milk a dozen pockets are pinched, crowns twisted, habits rethreaded. For 10 heartbeats the square breathes together like a body. Then someone coughs, someone laughs, someone says bread, and the world goes on. The goods train leaves with a modest confidence. Gzell meets Jacob halfway across the platform with ink on his finger and relief in his mouth. 17 pass, he says. If Zurich asks, I will tell them the town kept our minute for us in a chalkboard and a bell. He glances at the fog, which is considering snow again. Will you sleep in your shop tonight? I sleep where metal talks in its sleep, Jakob says, which is the same answer on clear nights and bad ones. If the wire returns at midnight, wake me with cursing. I will forgive you later. They shake hands as men do when a day has been kept together with string and breath. Jakob walks the fog back to his door, warmth reaching for him like a wife he never married. He trims the lamp, puts a fresh line on the card, and sets the traveling lever on the bench as if to tell it, you did what was asked and we will ask no more. New work arrives without being called. The smith's boy brings a mantel clock that has learned to stop at arguments. A woman who says she does not believe in the station waves a pocket watch that lives by it. An old man arrives with a timepiece that belonged to a regiment and claims that fog makes it run slow because soldiers never favored poetry. Jacob fixes the sticky cannon pinion and pretends to agree. The door breathes vapor. The stove answers with its own. Near dark, Leo returns trailing in smell. He is proud to report that dumplings obeyed sand, and the cook obeyed neither the mayor nor Frankfurt, and everyone is happier for it. He sets the empty hourglass on the bench with both hands, the way people set down babies and promises. The inn wants a second glass, he says. For stew that pretends not to be finite. Tomorrow, Jacob says. Tonight we keep the town's minute from wobbling. He gives the boy a blanket and the corner near the stove. Leo makes the complicated pillow of a cloak over a chair and declares his intention to remain conscious all night. He is asleep in 3 minutes with his face turned toward the regulator like a seedling toward light. The fog thickens, then thins. The square's lamps make gold coins in milk. At 9 footsteps, and not just any, the gait of a man whose boots are used to platforms. Otto fills the doorway and brings a pocket of cold with him. The line will be up by dawn, he says without greeting, as if continuing a sentence they never stopped. They found the break past the first bend. A fir came down under rime and took a span with it. 2 men on poles swearing into their collars. You fed them? Jacob asks. I fed the pole, Otto says, grinning. He produces a folded paper, company telegraph form misused as letter, and sets it on the bench. The chief says thank you for keeping a minute without him and please do it again, only never. He nods toward Leo. Your boy grows in his sleep. His wrists will be tested on Sunday, Jacob says. He pours coffee that has become philosophy and finds the flask Otto always carries against company cold. They sit with their elbows on the bench and talk low, the way men talk when words are excuses for being in the same light. Otto glances at the pocket where the lepin would be if it were still Jacob's problem. Mother? Here's what she wants to hear, Jacob says simply. And let soup scorch less. They do not say their father's name because some nights you set a watch and some nights you leave it alone. Close to midnight, a sound like a small animal waking arrives through the fog. Tick, tick, long. The telegraph begins to speak again in the station house across the square, faint as a memory but present. Gzell does not run. He walks with dignity into the office and sets his pencil down, and no one needs to tell Jacob because he knows what the air sounds like when information returns. He shrugs on his coat and steps into milk. At the station door, Gzell holds up a hand and they listen together to the top mark ride up the wire from the city, clean, imperturbable, unaware of dumplings and chalkboards. The regulator's seconds hand meets the click. Both men exhale the same breath. Thank you, Gzell says, which means more than the words hold. Tomorrow Zurich will send a page of numbers and call it gratitude. Numbers are better than cake, Jacob says, and hears his mother deny it somewhere in his blood. Keep the glass locked. Back in the shop, he lays another line on the card. Wire returns 2357, Regulator agrees and dims the lamp. Leo mutters, "Stew," and turns over. The cat, who has arrived uninvited and unconsulted, leverages herself into the warmest geography she can find, which happens to be Jakob's feet. He wakes early because Fog does not sleep late. Morning has pared itself down to essentials. The square is a whisper of footprints. The river has borrowed a voice. The wire clicks its city minute with sleepy arrogance. The tower speaks its Angelus true to the click. The town notices not that time returned, but that bread is bread, and the coach left when it told itself it would. After breakfast, 2 crusts and a forgiveness, Jacob wipes the chalkboard slate under the Rathaus and writes a neat "Thank you" that no one will understand and everyone will accept. By noon, the slate holds a sewing notice and news of a lost dog. He spends the rest of the day paying back the quiet debt Fog gave him. A marine-style box chronometer someone brought up from Basel needs a balance cleaned of invisible oil. A pair of carriage clocks consent to share the same minute after being told the story of yesterday. He drafts in the ledger's back pages a plan for a traveling minute for bad weather. A small, well-rated seconds-beating pendulum in a sprung case that can sit in the station office and consent to be moved without losing its temper. He sketches it the way men sketch boats they will never build, and then, because he is himself, adds a list of parts and a note to ask the cooper for ash thin as a vowel. As dusk shades the windows, the door opens to admit the mayor, damp at the edges but pleased with himself. "No letters came," he says by way of blessing. The 2 men argued about whether noon is a place or a line and ended friends. Frau Beery sent rolls to the tower. The inn named the Dumpling Glass. "A Moses minute. Bread always wins," Jacob says. "Until you are hungry," the mayor says, and then, surprising them both, adds, "Thank you," awkward as a man not used to speaking humbly in other people's rooms. When the mayor leaves, the shop returns to its own size. Jacob writes the last line of the day. Wire mended, town unbroken, and closes the ledger as if putting to bed a restless child. He stands a long moment with his palm on the case of the bench regulator, feeling not the tick but the quiet between ticks, which is where a day's work lives. In the farmhouse up valley, a woman breathes with a silver beat near her ribs. Under glass at the station, a seconds hand makes perfect little circles as if fog had never existed. On the tower, a bell waits to say a clean 12 to people who will be in the middle of something and look up anyway. Leo in the corner sleeps open-mouthed and will deny it furiously in the morning. Otto writes a note on a stolen form and sticks it under a cup where Jacob will find it, ridiculous with exactitude. The town keeps 2 kinds of promises, and tonight, because fog taught it how, it keeps them both. Jacob banks the stove, folds the blanket over the boy's shoulder, and turns the lamp down until it is no more than an ember thinking itself a star. He listens, not to clocks now, but to the day refusing to come apart in his hands, and hears only the sound he has learned to spend his life for. People breathing in the company of a beat they trust. Morning steps back into clarity as if someone has wiped the sky with a clean sleeve. The fog is gone, roofs glitter, the river shows its black spine again. In the workshop, the stove's thin breath threads the air, and the bench is exactly where he left it. Ledger open, card tucked under the regulator, tools in their hollows like sleeping birds. Under a cup that does not belong on the bench is a folded paper. Jakob smiles even before he opens it. Otto's pranks have a geometry. The company form is misused as a letter, ink precise and impertinent. A brother wire mended 2357. Zurich will send gratitude by arithmetic. I prefer to send this. A visitor will come today. Inspector Keller wants to see how you kept a minute without him. Be kind. He is a toll on a bridge we must cross. P.S. Your boy drools when he sleeps. Do not tell him I told you. Or Jakob tucks the note under the stone on the ledger next to the day's list and makes a fresh line. Inspector, afternoon. He adds 2 more, Cooper ash strips and spring cradle. The sketch he drew in the back pages last night, the small, seconds-beating pendulum in a sprung case, is still warm in his mind. A traveling minute for bad weather, a heartbeat the town can carry across a room without turning angry. Leo arrives carrying a roll under his arm and the secret knowledge that someone has mocked his sleep. He pretends not to see the cup, pretends not to be awake yet, fails at both. The inn named the dumpling glass, he announces, hopeful. They're calling it Moser's Minute. They will call it that until the next fashion, Jakob says, but he is pleased. He unties the roll. Ash slats slide out, pale and flexible, perfumed with steam and forest. Herr Etterlin was generous. The Cooper said ash listens when you bend it, Leo reports. He said oak argues. Then we will talk to ash. Jacob sets the slats on the bench and lays the sketch beside them. A wooden frame the size of a breadboard, brass crosspiece for a short pendulum, 4 curved ash strips forming a cradle that holds the movement like a hand from 4 directions. If the station's wire goes under weather again, the station will not be blind. It will have a steady, local second to stand on. They begin the unglamorous work that makes ideas into objects, marking curves with a pencil, shaving edges with a small plane until 2 strips mirror each other exactly, bending them over a heated iron to teach them their arc, binding pairs with twine to cool. Leo sands the ends where the brass shoes will sit. Jakob files the shoes to accept a spring pin. The little pendulum rod, cut from straight-grained maple, receives a brass bob turned from a scrap the tinsmith owed him. The escape is pinwheel, honest and forgiving. The pallets, steel polished on leather until they love their work. Between steps, the shop attends to its ordinary obligations. A seamstress brings in a face cracked by last year's fall. Jacob replaces porcelain with a clean enamel, copies the numerals in a hand that knows both modesty and flourish, and returns the thing to her with a warning about sewing while walking. The school sends a boy to ask if the chalkboard can stay under the Rathaus eaves, in case weather has opinions again. Jakob says yes, because weather always does. Frau Biri arrives with a tray, and the ferocious kindness of those who feed a town. 2 buns for Leo, a heel of something dark for the Meister, and news. The hourglass works. Men now think bread is a mathematician. By late morning, the ash strips hold their shape. 4 identical arcs that spring in and out with a quiet, persuasive strength. Jakob drills holes in the frame, seats little brass shoes, and slides the ash in under just enough tension to make a cradle that will absorb a bump instead of passing it on as an insult. The movement, simple and clean, bolts to the crosspiece. The short pendulum hangs and finds its swing. The tick is brisk, well brought up, unpretentious. He writes, shop regulator -2S to traveling minute. Then sets the traveling pendulum against the bench regulator and nudges its rating nut until the 2 seconds agree, like neighbors at a fence line. Leo, face grave, counts under his breath and nods when the hands line. At noon, the Angelus lands with a precision that feels newly earned. 3 strokes breathing evenly, then 12 falling like coins into an even purse. No chalk today, no counting under eaves, just people pausing, because they have remembered that pausing does not subtract anything from their lives. Inspector Keller arrives exactly when the company says people should, which is to say 7 minutes before the hour. He is buttoned and glossed, trousers unwrinkled by journeys that would ruin other men's cloth. His mustache declares a policy. He shakes Jakob's hand as if testing a spring. Meister Amsler, he says, glancing past the man to the room, measuring with a professional tick the state of order and oil. You kept a schedule in fog. We kept a minute, Jakob answers. Schedules take more than one thing. Keller's mouth twitches, almost a smile, quickly put away like a coin in the wrong pocket. I will ask what I must ask. He glances at the regulator, at the ledger, at the ash and brass thing on the bench that swings like a child in a well-made cradle. And what is this? A seconds beater that does not get offended if you move it, Jakob says. For the station office, for days when the wire is lower than our valley. Keller's eyebrows rise the way men's eyebrows do when a problem they did not bring their own solution to is shown a solution they can report as if it had been their idea. He leans in. It will hold rate? In a room that does not sneeze, Jakob says, not out of disdain but because truth spoken calmly travels farther. Gzell steps in at that moment with his book under his arm and gratitude disguised as impatience. Inspector, he says, we have a postal to turn at 17 and the wire says Basel sneezed. The carriage clocks in 3rd class do not care, but Zurich will. Come here the bench, he nods to Jakob. Bring your little fraud. They carry the traveling minute to the station like a ceremonial object no one wants to admit is ceremonial. On the clerk's table, cleared of forms and crumbs, it sits in its ash cradle and ticks its brisk domestic beat. Jakob adjusts it to the station regulator, then closes the glass on the regulator with a click decisive enough to make a policy of its own. Keller watches the seconds hand meet the sounder's top click, then watches the ash cradle ride a small nudge of the table without translating it to the pendulum. He says nothing, which is the sound of a man counting favors. By the time the goods train huffs into its slot, there is an audience, a tinsmith with hands that dare not touch, a pair of boys whose eyes memorize the way big men make decisions, Frau Moser from the inn carrying a pot she refuses to describe. "If this clock keeps noodles," she says to Giselle under her breath, "I will send the company an invoice for flour." "Please do," Giselle murmurs, eyes on Keller. "Address it to Zurich. Attention, men with wires." Keller produces a small seal and, to the astonishment of everyone who has never needed to be astonished by railway men, stamps a paper with something like a blessing. "We will trial this at stations with poor line," he says, which is company for thank you. "Meister Amsler, your method is noted." He pockets a copy of Jakob's sketch as if pocketing his gratitude would keep it from evaporating. When the men disperse and the platform returns to being a platform, Otto appears like a man arriving from the wrong direction. He has coal on his cuff and triumph he is trying to minimize. "You taught Ash to behave," he says. "Leo taught it sandpaper, I taught it no," Jakob says. He looks at his brother for a long second that contains all the sentences they won't bother to say. "You could still be inspector," Otto offers lightly, as if he hadn't already told the company no on Jakob's behalf 3 different ways. "I am already inspector for the square," Jakob answers. The job pays in bread and scolding. They walk back to the shop together, because brothers do not require invitations to end at the same door. Leo has covered the bench with a clean cloth, sensing that inspectors leave a dust you should not mix with filings. He tries not to stand taller when the men come in and fails. Otto ruffles his hair. Leo submits as a professional courtesy. Afternoon carries news along its ribs. The mayor, bustling without having moved, pops in to announce, without actually announcing, that the council will pay a small stipend for a town timekeeper, a phrase he tastes and finds to his surprise that he likes. "We will formalize it on paper," he says, "so that when old men complain there is a place for their complaint to rest." He glances at the ash cradle and frowns at it as if it were a fox in a henhouse and a welcome one. "And this we will call a loan. The kind that never returns. You will call it a tool," Jakob says, more gently than the sentence could have been. "And you will make a place for it near the telegraph." The mayor nods, already writing the speech he will give about municipal foresight and partnerships with modernity. Later, Jacob steps up valley. He carries nothing. The Lepine rides where it now belongs, buttoned into his mother's dress. On the path, he meets the schoolteacher who has chalk on his cuff and a pleased expression. "The children counted fog," the teacher says. "They will tell their own children." "A teacher's wealth," Jakob says, and the man laughs softly at how true and how poor that sounds, and how rich. At the farmhouse, his mother is seeing to beans like a general in a good mood. The watch talks in her pocket. She pretends she does not listen, then says without being asked, "It keeps like a good man in rain." She glances at the window and adds, "Bring the boy Sunday and I will decide if his wrists are worth soup." "His wrists are worth a world," Jacob says, and is careful not to sound proud. "Pride makes mother show you the door and hand you a loaf for the road." Back in the square by dusk, the chalkboard under the Rathaus has been half erased by new notices. A cow for sale, a pair of boots seeking a second foot. In the gap between, someone has written, "In a hand too neat for a child and too mischievous for a clerk. Thank you for counting." No one claims it, the town owns it. Evening pours itself into the workshop without asking. Jakob sets the traveling minute on a shelf where it can see the door and be seen. He drafts a cleaner version of the design, with numbers and names for each piece so that when some other town writes asking how to keep a second in their weather, he can answer with more than a story. He also sets something aside, quietly, the way important things are done, in a drawer Leo now uses. A small, honest movement with its mainspring let down, a modest challenge that will become the boy's first complete overhaul. He places a loop atop it, a real one, not a borrowed eye. On a scrap of card he writes, "For your wrists, J.A." He leaves the drawer slightly ajar so discovery can feel like earning. After he cleans the lamp and banks the stove, he walks to the door and stands with the plank still turned to open, though the hour does not agree. Outside, gaslight rings the square. The tower keeps the company's minute now, not because the company is always right, but because the town has decided to bring a far-off river into its well. Under glass at the station, the second's hand goes about its diurnal arrogance, and no one minds. In the bakery, 2 hourglasses tick their quiet sand while loaves swell and turn. In the inn, dumplings consent to Moser's minute, unless a story runs long. He turns the plank to closed, at last, and breathes in the room, the way men do when they are not alone and have always been. The long case speaks low, the bench regulator lifts and sets its foot. The ash cradle's little pendulum carries its brisk secret. Somewhere up the valley a woman sleeps with a silver beat against her ribs, and somewhere on the line a brother writes numbers on a form and pretends they are poetry. Jakob sits with his ledger open for the last lines. He writes them without changing his hand, without adding flourish, because the truth deserves only accuracy. Station, wire steady, traveling minute installed. Inspector saw paper stamped. Council, timekeeper, small stipend. Mother, watch keeps, rain. Leo, first movement set. A town kept 2 promises, will keep more. He dries the ink with a breath and closes the book. Then he does what he has done since he was a boy standing on a chair to see over his father's elbow. He listens not for the tick, but for the calm between ticks. It is there, it holds. Tomorrow there will be letters and bread and complaints and small adjustments and a boy discovering his loop. Tomorrow there will be a wire that might misbehave and ash that knows its curve. Tonight there is a room holding its own minute, a town that learned the shape of 2 kinds of time and decided to call both of them home, and a man who knows at last that he does not need to leave to arrive.